Alright, this deck's a little bit different, in that it's complete and utter shite. It doesn't have removal, it has a terrible win percentage, it folds to basically everything, and it's kind of fun. And we get to do some cool maths. It's basically a big Timmy deck. You got these undergrowth fatties, get bigger with stuff in the graveyard, put lots of things in the graveyard with cyclers and millers, and hope that big numbers that you get on your creatures are big enough to beat your opponent's shit.
Alright, so in this first game we can show you how it's supposed to be done. We got Lana Worlds to start with, you know, having an extra couple mana on the first turn's pretty good. We get to show that the cyclers, well, they cycle, put creatures in the graveyard, and eventually they'll hopefully draw us into our action, and that we'll be able to go from here. Against this opponent we're playing Karuga, which means they ain't got much at the low end of the curve, and find that this opponent especially in particular is an absolute potato, and we're still only just barely gonna beat them by turn 5. That's not very good, to be perfectly honest. So turn 4, we got turn 3, whatever it is, we got 5 mana, we got a 5/5, we got trample. Opponents at 3 lands, still done nothing. Stitcher Supplier. Stitcher Supplier is nice in that mills 3. Milling 3 with a 41 creature deck means that you can mill on average 2.05 creatures, I suppose. That'll be hit 3, which is extra helpful. So attacking for, what is this, 9, can cycle for another 10. Hitting for 10 on turn 4 is you know, that's kinda cool, but imagine our opponent here untaps, and hell, imagine that they just have a removal spell here on turn 4 or turn 3. Hit for 11, go through all of our cyclers, and ooh, it's so great. Imagine they just untap and wrath. This deck, what would we have? We'd have 4 lands and another land in hand, and fuck all else to do with that. But luckily, our opponent's a potato, and we're able to win. That's how it goes, but that's not how it always goes. So, that's a basic strategy. Next couple games, you can speed it up a little bit. I guess I can tell you something that to do. Typically, you want to go through your cyclers if you don't have a undergrowth fatty in your hand already. With the idea that hopefully you'll draw it and you'll be able to play it. There we go. We've got the Fiend Artisan, it's a 4/4. It's a 7/7 now with that hella great Stitcher Supply mill. Opponents on their own go toll deck. Here, I'm afraid that they're gonna have one of the cards that puts a counter on your creature with the Ozolith, gives them enough to kill our Fiend Artisan, and because we've got the Fiend Artisan and we've got the Great Henge, great. Of course it is. But it's drawing us extra cards. Those Stitcher Suppliers and Llanowar Elves that would normally be dead bricks and stop us from being able to do anything, they'd be they're now able to turn into cyclers and go through our deck. Opponent hits for 17. Congratulations for them getting such a big creature, but we've got an even bigger creature in our 18/18, and that creature's gonna get even larger. Got Old Stickfingers to mill an extra couple cards. You can always just put extra X into Old Stickfingers and you'll have, it's equivalent to cycling creatures. But look at that, a 24/24 creature. That's pretty great. Trampling over all their big shit with our bigger shit. And our big shit actually has trample. Well, their shit had trample too. But now we get into the part of the games where deck doesn't look as good. Mill for 6 with Urborg Lhurgoyf always feels very good. But of course, our opponent actually has it isn't a potato this time, it has the Wandering Emperor. Is able to stop our stuff. Here I decide that, you know, I attack in with the Fiend Artisan, they just block it. We don't have trample right now, so it doesn't do a damn thing. So I figured I would use Fiend Artisan, find another Fiend Artisan, which the next turn can find 2 more Fiend Artisans or something like that. But, you know, they play Wandering Emperor, they play a Wrath, and that's just the end of the game. The rest on us. Haha, gotcha. This is an interesting game. So, part of the idea of dealing with removal is to just use a Zap Brannigan style. Our opponent uses removal, and we just keep throwing creatures at him. Got, what, 7 Llanowar Elves for them to use Fatal Push on, and then 9 fatties for them to actually need to care about. Here, well, our opponent pushed a Llanowar Elf, and we played a fatty, but they also had a removal for the fatty. Of course we're going to draw another fatty, right? We've got 9 of them in the fucking deck. No. And our opponent, they're pre-sideboarded against us. Look at that. Go blank in the main board. In addition to all these fucking waste knots. And of course, we're drawing the fucking cycling part of our deck, so all of our cyclers just turn into extra creatures for them. Isn't that just fucking wonderful? Let me just give the fuck up here. Alright, let's take a break from the parade of losses and answer the question, is 17 lands actually enough? To answer that question, we're going to hop over to a hypergeometric calculator. For something like this, you put in the size of your deck, the number of successes, your sample size, which is 7, your starting hand, and however many lands you want to have. And it gives you the probability of that particular thing, the probability of drawing at least that particular thing, and some extra math if you ever want to do the math yourself. So we do a bit of that math, and we find that the odds of drawing at least 2 lands in the deck is 65%. That is not very good. That's pretty shite actually. But what we can find is the probability of drawing at least 2 mana sources, which is more what we care about. So we have 17 lands and 7 Llanowar Elves, so the odds that we draw at least 1 land. Because if we don't draw at least 1 land, drawing 3 Llanowar Elves is going to do fuck all. So we have the odds that we draw exactly 1 land, and then the odds that we have at least 1 Llanowar Elves, given that we have exactly 1 land. This is called conditional probability. We plug in these numbers to the hypergeometric calculator, and we use the upper cumulative portion because we want to know how greater than or equal to. Not just equal to. So, to find the odds of drawing 1 land, exactly 1 land, and 1 or more Llanowar Elves, we use conditional probability. We say that probability of A and B is the probability of A given B times the probability of B by itself. And we find that we multiply these two things together, we get 18%. So, our odds of drawing at least 2 mana sources is 65 plus 18 is 83%. Which is not that bad, to be honest. We can compare this to other distributions of lands and Llanowar Elves, and we can see that 83% versus 24 lands is 86% to draw 2 mana sources, so we're not that far off. And this is comparable to just having 23 lands. Another distribution, if you really want to get that extra 2%, is to go 18 lands and 7 Llanowar Elves, but it's not worth it if you ask me. You can also find the odds that you'll draw the 3rd land off of the draw in 2 cycles, given that you've drawn 2 mana sources to start with. So go back into the hypergeometric calculator. We put in our sample size of 3. We're looking at 3 cards. We're cycling 2 cards and drawing 1 card for turn. We know that there's 16 lands left in deck. One of them's in our hand, the other's left in deck. And it's a bit of a crapshoot, to be honest. It's about 67% to draw that land, and probably good enough. The deck functions well enough on 2 lands that who cares. Your expectation of drawing a land is 0.91, and this is how many lands you'll draw over the course of many times of trying this. Obviously, you can't draw 0.9 of a land, so you'll either draw 0 or 1 or 2 or potentially 3, but the odds of that are very likely. And the way that you find this is you take the probability of each one and you multiply it by its value. So you get 33% to draw 0, 45% to draw 1, 19% to draw 2, and 2% to draw 3. You add those all up together and you get the 0.91. Which means that you're slightly more likely to draw 0 lands than 2 lands. And you would need to construct your deck if you actually cared about getting to 4 mana, let's say. compared to staying at 0 or 2 mana. This deck works fine on 0 or 2 mana, so whatever. That is expectation values and a bit about how you use them. Kind of cool. Bit of math. Like math. Alright, this one. So, this is a nice special game for you to really sink your teeth into, isn't it? Look at that. Leyline of the fucking void in the fucking main deck. That's absolutely fucking mental. Just, oh, I'm playing it for the devotion. Isn't that fucking great for you? It's not great for me, because I can't fucking play through that at all. Alright, here we got a matchup against the Healer's Hook deck. The Healer's Hook deck. If you can't beat a fucking Healer's Hook deck, what the fuck are you doing? Here, try using our cycling engine to actually do things with the cycling engine. Play our little folks here, hoping to be able to make it big. Of course, they have removal for that too. Removal for fucking everything. Having to use our 2 mana cyclers and Titan Author X and not being able to put a trample counter on it. Sad state of affairs. Here we've got Fiend Artisan, and we're able to play the Great Henge, but guess what? At this point, there's nothing fucking to use the Great Henge on. Dude's flying, we can play our Llanowar Elves and all the shit that we want. There's no flying in this deck, so it doesn't fucking matter what we do. Now let's go back to our safe space. Let's go back to math. Math is great. So how many cards can you expect to cycle in a game? Can you expect to chain your cyclers together, where you pitch one, draw another, pitch one, draw another, pitch one, draw another? The answer to that is mostly no. Not in a deck where your deck isn't almost entirely composed of cyclers. It turns out that for 19 cyclers, a reasonable amount, on turn 3 or 4, you can expect to get 4.5 total cycles, which is, it's okay. But the interesting thing is how we actually got to this number, and it's this calculation right here, which is very scary and involves lots of numbers and everything. These are the variables in this, and you can't just go to a website and plug in numbers and get this. You have to do a little bit of math and a little bit to do it on your own. I built this absolutely gorgeous Excel spreadsheet. Well, not Excel, what is this, Google Sheets or something like that. Anyway, you put in the deck total, the number of cyclers, and the cards naturally drawn. For example, on turn 3 or 4, you got 10. On turn 5 or 6, you got 12 or something like that. Put in those numbers and you can get the expected number of total cycles drawn out, as well as the number of cyclers naturally drawn. Now, what each of these boxes are, these are this part of the equation. So, if you have naturally drawn one cycler, you can afford no misses. Any non-cycler that you draw a land, your cycling stops, your chain stops, you can't do any more. So, this goes to the probability that you stop after each of these number of cyclers. Sum those probabilities up, and you get 1.5 total cycles for each cycler that you draw, basically. So that's the expectation value for the number of total cycles that you'll get, given that you draw that many cyclers naturally. Now let's say you draw 2 cyclers naturally. If you ever draw a single land in your cycling chain, it doesn't matter. You've got another cycler in your hand that you can start the chain over with. So the odds of you stopping at 1 is 0. Go farther down, again, remember these are 2 times the odds of stopping at these things, or 7 times the odds of stopping at each of these things. Let's say you cycle twice and you hit both lands, that's the odds of stopping here. Take the sum of those probabilities and you get the expectation value of 2.9. This 2.9 is a little bit less than the 1.5 that you had for the single one, because there's fewer cyclers left in your deck. It makes a little bit of sense, right? So for 3 cyclers naturally drawn, you get 4.2. For 4 cyclers naturally drawn, you can expect to get 5.5. And then you take the next part of the equation where you get the probability of drawing those number of cyclers, and you multiply these probabilities by these expectation values, you sum them all together, and you get the expected number of total cycles. Simple math, right? Absolutely simple. It's beautiful. It's applicable to the modern living in cycling deck, although it's brilliant and it's all of it. The link for this will be in the description if you want to play around with it a little bit yourself for your modern living in deck, or if you want to try and improve this deck, something like that. But all the math in the world ain't gonna change the fact that if your opponent opens a bloody Leyline of the Void in the main, that you're just fucking screwed with this deck. So at this point I got tired of you losing with this shit deck. You trying to use the Wildlands to actually cast the cycling part of the deck. Valiant Rescuer in particular was one that was supposed to be able to go wide instead of going tall, but this dude's carrying one dude on his back. That's certainly not enough to carry this fucking deck. It's completely useless. So I decided to cut all the cycling cards and go to something that would just be focused on the undergrowth fatties. So we took out all the white lands in the deck and we switched to more black, green, blue mana base to be able to double kick Urborg Lhurgoyf a bit more often. And luckily the win rate increased. Also jumped over to rank to do this. I mean, these win rates look pretty good. And then I started playing against good players, and you know, the flaws of the deck started showing themselves again. And oh my fucking god, it is still not a fucking good deck. It's so bad. Not only do you have, you know, graveyard hate potentially in the main board for things like Greasefang, because Greasefang is actually a good graveyard deck that people care about. You got mono green that plays Karn, and Karn can just 4 mana go find the Tormod's Crypt, and boom, there goes your entire build up of the previous turns. All of it's gone. Your entire graveyard just fucking vanished out of thin air. But you also have to deal with the fact that a lot of decks are just better than this one. It's so sad. You have things like Greasefang, where if they just hit Greasefang and Parhelion 2, it's more explosive than whatever the fuck you're doing. And you have things like Angels, where they just beat your face in. You've got things like Control, where they just kill everything, and they have Wraths, and you don't really have a good plan for Wraths, and there's so much that beats this fucking deck right now. It's technically a 53% win rate, but a lot of that is playing against bad players. You start playing against good players with good decks and it goes to shit. Alright, back to the gameplay. Here we have a matchup against another graveyard deck, which is actually kind of interesting in my opinion. It's pretty cool to be able to see, like, you know, which is the better mill deck. You got Narcomoebas versus you got 5/5 Fiend Artisan on turn 3. That's pretty cool. Our creatures are certainly a lot bigger, and we've got this Titan off Rex in our hand to be able to just force through so much damage. Here, maybe I should have gone ahead and Titan off the Fiend Artisan, but I figured I wanted to get a bigger creature. Bigger creature is great. It doesn't really matter if they block our Stitcher Suppliers. We kind of want them to die to be able to put more power onto our Fiend Artisan, get in for more trample damage. And we got 3 11/11 spell flows, whatever they are, against whatever the heck our opponent's doing. If they had hit one of the burn spells, that would have been bad, but alright, for this last match, we're going against Angels. We'll show you a little bit about what I mean. We had Stitcher Supplier and or Llanowar on turn 1. Going through our cyclers, we get to play our Fiend Artisan, which is pretty good. 4/4. It can be a 5/5 on turn 3. Gets removed, of course. And Angels didn't even they don't even have Collected Company in this game. Look at this. Hit us for a little bit. They play all these creatures. They get triggers. Massive. Did I have fun this match? Well, you know, the deck did what it did. It played creatures, didn't win. You got no removal, so what do you expect to do against that? That's just how it goes. So, that's the deck. Urborg Lhurgoyf